kids are failing in their quizzes and in their tests, and I'm not understanding why they're doing it. For those of you who don't know, I'm a digital artist and I'm also a private tutor online. And so I've been noticing a pattern with my students when they come into class and I start tutoring them. I've noticed that they don't know how to take tests, they don't know how to take quizzes, and they're failing. And then they tell me stories about how other kids in their classes do, and I'm just like, ugh, what? I don't understand. What's happening? Did your teacher not teach you this? Did your teacher not show you how to take a quiz or how to take a test? And they're like, no, they just say do it like this. And I'm like, okay, but how do you solve this? And this is a very frightening thing because tests and quizzes are used to evaluate how much a child has progressed. Well, that is how it should be used. That's their initial purpose. How they progress, how they understand the material. So if they're failing, that means they're not understanding the material. But there's also that aspect of how to take a test, how to take a quiz. There are some study skill sets and guides that are very useful that kids can use when they're taking a test or a quiz, even if they're not good in that subject. I'm a 90s and early 2000s kid. So when I was in school, I was taught certain skill sets. I was taught certain tricks, as you might say, and tips on how to study and to take a test and take a quiz. Because let me tell you, chemistry kicked my butt. It kicked my butt so hard. I got a passing grade. It wasn't the grade I wanted, but I got a passing grade. And that's mostly because I knew how to take a test and I knew how to take a quiz. Does anyone else remember being taught how to do those things? And I'm just going to run down a few of the things I do teach my kids when I tutor them online. I call them my kids, but they're like my students, but they're like my kids. I do tutor them online so that they know how to take it comfortably because part of the majority of test taking is a mental battle. It's the mental fortitude. And I just don't think they're teaching that mental fortitude in schools anymore. I don't know why. It maybe there's too many kids in a classroom. I mean, like 35 kids, that is a lot. That is a lot. Maybe the curriculum or the focus of the education department has changed. Like we're not testing that well at an international level. We don't have the best grades compared to other countries in the world. I mean, even with all the accommodations that kids have, being able to retake the test or quiz multiple times, being able to get like extra time when taking a test or quiz, bringing in your study guide to be able to help you with the test or do the quiz. I mean, there's so many accommodations that if you had taken the student that I was then in the 90s and early 2000s and put me in the school today, you would not be able to stop me. I would have been a beast because I wrote notes, I doodled, I did all of that. I really did. Oh, I had to take a moment and breathe. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about the elephant and the zoo in the room. Kids these days in school, especially middle school and high school, don't know how to take tests. They don't know how to do quizzes. They don't know how to do it. And I've been in education for a very long time as a student and as a tutor and a teacher. So I understand how the game is. The game really hasn't changed all that. I mean, sometimes or in some places it has, and you can really see it, but the majority of it just seems to be the same to me. So I teach it to the kids that I tutor, that I private tutor, and they do well. They start to understand it because, like I said, it's just a mental game. And that's all it is. Let's take math, for example, right? Math is mental fortitude, physical fortitude, being able to sit down and answer a long division and long multiplication question without losing your place and keeping track of where you are. That's a lot of focus. To sit down and focus that hard for like 5 minutes. Did you know the average attention span of an American citizen is like 3 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds? Has it gotten shorter? I don't know. But when I last checked, it was like 3 to 5 seconds. How can you expect a student to sit down and solve something for 5 minutes? They don't have the fortitude or the endurance for it. So I build them up on that because that's the test and the quiz tests your mental, emotional, and physical endurance. So let's talk about the test. Let's talk about that test. Let's talk about that quiz. Okay. So, like I said, 90s, early 2000s student, and these are some of the things that I learned throughout my educational career. And my parents, they're also teachers too, and they've been in the teaching game for as long as I've been a student. So they gave me some important study skills and assets that I used in my education, especially my higher education. So the first thing is how to pace yourself on a quiz, how to pace yourself on a test. That's important because you can get burnt out quickly, especially if it's a long, long test or exam, or it seems long to the kids, or it's a short exam, like it only has 5 questions, but these 5 questions could take 5 to 10 minutes each to solve because you need to use this equation to get this variable answer and then use that variable answer and plug it back into the equation so then you can get your answer. And then you have to double check your answer, which is the other thing, double checking your work. Do they not teach kids how to double check their work these days? Because that was one of the golden rules in my household. Double check your work. Even though you know the answer is correct, go back after a few minutes and double check it because there might have been something you missed. And most of the time with my kids that I've tutored, they have missed something. And it's just double checking to make sure. How to spot the same question in a test that's been rinsed, washed, and repeated. Rinsed, washed, and repeated. So, like, let's say you solved a question that took you 5 minutes, and then later on in the test, you're like, "Oh, I had this in the other question." So now you go back, take your equation after you've double checked it, and you know that your answer is correct and that x does equal this variable and that the statement is true. Use that similar equation, switch out the answers or the numbers that they give, find what they are asking for, and solve. Because a lot of the questions that they have on homework, quizzes, and tests, they're basically the same. They just switch out the question, they just switch out some of the numbers, and they ask you to solve for this variable instead of that variable. So being able to spot that can help you save time and increase your chances of getting points. Let's not forget the process of elimination. Who remembers the process of elimination? The process of elimination being, for those of you who don't know, is that you cross out the answers, you cross out the options that you know are not true and focus on the ones that are left. So let's say you have A, B, C, D, E. You cross out A, B, and C, and you have D and E left. And so it increases your chances of getting the right answer because you make an educated estimation. Do what you can now and come back later. That's also an important one because you don't want to waste time on a test or a quiz. So you will do the answer. You do the answer that you can. And then if you keep getting it wrong, you skip it. And then you come back later to finish it because the solution that you were looking for could have been later on in the test. And then you're like, oh, I can use this to solve this now. And you go back and you solve for it. You also double check your work. I'm not going to stop saying that. Double check your work because you could solve for it. But then you're like, I got the answer for the variable of X. Okay, but did you plug it into the equation? And that's another thing. They don't teach kids how to double check their work. Like once you get the variable, plug it back into the equation and make sure the statement is true. If it's not true, your answer is wrong. Go prepared with your study guide. And I keep looking over here because I'm actually writing a blog post about this for my website so that I can, well, I'm just talking about it now, but I'm writing a blog post about it because I want to know. I'm just like, this is an important thing to talk about. So going in, so you have all of these accommodations and they're great accommodations, but the kids are still failing and you're left wondering why. It's probably because they don't know how to take a test. They don't know how to take a quiz. They just don't know how to do it. Like everything that I mentioned, those just seem like basic common sense things, but they don't teach that in school anymore, it seems like. Like I said, maybe they don't have the time. Maybe the goals have changed. I don't know. I don't know. But our kids should not be failing because they have these amazing accommodations and these resources. They shouldn't. And education doesn't have to be hard. It can be fun and you can have fun learning. And you don't have to freak out when you take a quiz, when you take a test, because by knowing the things that I mentioned in the video, you'd be able to take your test. You'd be able to take your quiz comfortably. Even if you're not that great at the subject itself, you can still be able to do it. And that's what I focus on when I private tutor. And I'm curious, as a parent, are you noticing this? Did you grow up in the same time that I grew up in with the same study guidelines and how to take a test and how to study for a test? Like, do you notice that this is missing in the current education that we have in schools? And if you're a student, do you notice that this is missing? Did you even know the points that I mentioned today? And I want us to have this conversation because it's an important conversation to have and to figure out what are the next steps to do in order to change this. Some of my parents got a private tutor. They got me so that I could tutor their kids these essential skill sets, and they know I'm tutoring them these things, and they're seeing a difference. The kids are seeing a difference. I see the difference in the kids. They're more confident because you're able to solve something even though you feel like you don't know how to do it. Eventually, you do learn how to do it because we build that confidence in you. But like I said, it's all a mind game. And why aren't we teaching this with our kids when they have all these accommodations? Why are they failing? Let's talk about it.